The spring sun beat down on the quiet streets of Oakwood Heights, a neighborhood where American flags hung from porches and children's bikes lay scattered across front lawns. Officer James Mercer adjusted his sunglasses as he drove slowly down Maple Street in his patrol car. He'd been working this beat for nearly 15 years, and he prided himself on knowing every face that belonged and spotting those that didn't. The radio crackled with routine updates as Mercer sipped his lukewarm coffee. It was Thursday afternoon, usually quiet except for the occasional speeding ticket or noise complaint. His attention sharpened when he spotted an unfamiliar man walking up the driveway of the old Wilson house at the corner of Maple and Pine. The man was tall with broad shoulders, dressed in jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. He carried a toolbox and moved with purpose toward the back door of the house. Something about him made Mercer's instincts flare. Maybe it was the way he glanced around before heading to the side gate, or maybe it was simply that Mercer hadn't seen him in the neighborhood before. Without hesitation, Mercer flipped on his lights and pulled his cruiser to the curb. He radioed in his location and stepped out of the car, adjusting his belt where his holster sat heavy against his hip. "Hey, you there," Mercer called out, his voice carrying across the lawn. "Hold up a minute." The man turned, his expression shifting from surprise to a careful neutrality that came from years of similar experiences. This was Darnell Wilson, though Officer Mercer didn't know that yet. Darnell set his toolbox down slowly and faced the approaching officer. "Afternoon, officer," Darnell said, his voice steady and clear. "Can I help you with something?" Mercer closed the distance between them, his hand resting casually near his weapon. "Mind telling me what you're doing at this residence?" His eyes scanned Darnell from head to toe, lingering on the toolbox. "This is my mother's house," Darnell explained. "I'm here to fix her back steps. The wood's rotting out and I promised I'd come by today to replace it." He gestured toward the toolbox. "Got all my supplies right here." Mercer's expression remained unchanged. "Your mother lives here? Rose Wilson's place?" "Yes, sir. Rose Wilson is my mom. I'm Darnell Wilson." He started to reach toward his back pocket. "I can show you my ID. Keep your hands where I can see them." Mercer's voice sharpened as his hand moved to his holster. "I didn't ask you to reach for anything." Darnell froze, his hands now visible at chest height. The air between them seemed to thicken with tension. Across the street, curtains moved in windows as neighbors noticed the flashing lights of the patrol car. "Officer, I'm just trying to show you my identification," Darnell said, his voice still calm though his heart hammered in his chest. "My wallet's in my back pocket. You always come to your mother's house through the side gate?" Mercer asked, ignoring Darnell's explanation. "Yes, sir. The front steps are too steep for her these days. We use the side door by the kitchen." Darnell kept his breathing steady, drawing on years of training as a firefighter. "Stay calm, don't escalate. I've been coming here this way for years." A few houses down, Beth Peterson stepped onto her porch, phone in hand. She'd known Rose Wilson for over 20 years and recognized her son immediately. Something about the officer's stance made her uneasy enough to start recording. "How long have you been a resident of Oakwood Heights?" Mercer continued his questioning, still not moving his hand from his weapon. "I grew up here," Darnell answered. "Moved out about 10 years ago when I got my own place closer to the fire station. I work as a firefighter over at Station 8. "Station 8? Mercer's eyebrow raised slightly. "You expect me to believe that?" Darnell took a slow breath. "Yes, sir. I've been with the department for 12 years now. I'm a lieutenant on Engine 4. Funny, I don't recall seeing you around the station." Mercer's tone suggested he didn't believe a word. Darnell was saying, "We might have crossed paths at the annual police fire softball game," Darnell offered, "though I missed last year's game. Was on a wildfire deployment upstate." By now, several neighbors had gathered on nearby porches and sidewalks. Beth Peterson had moved closer, her phone still recording as she dialed the police station with her landline. 2 doors down, Tom Garcia, a retired high school principal, stepped out onto his lawn, arms crossed as he watched the scene unfold. "I'm going to need to see some identification," Mercer finally said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "My ID is in my wallet. In my back right pocket," Darnell said clearly. "I'm going to reach for it very slowly, okay?" Mercer nodded, but as Darnell's hand moved toward his pocket, the officer suddenly drew his weapon, pointing it directly at Darnell's chest. "I said, keep your hands where I can see them," Mercer shouted, his voice echoing down the quiet street. Darnell immediately raised both hands again, higher this time. "Officer, please." My wallet is in my back pocket. You asked for my ID. Beth Peterson gasped audibly from where she stood recording. Tom Garcia started walking toward them, his face set in a determined frown. Officer Mercer, Garcia called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades managing rowdy teenagers. What on earth are you doing? That's Rose Wilson's boy. Mercer didn't lower his weapon, but his eyes flicked briefly toward Garcia. Stay back, Tom. This doesn't concern you. It sure as hell does concern me when you're pointing a gun at a neighbor in broad daylight, Garcia replied, though he stopped advancing. That's Darnell Wilson. He's been coming here his whole life. From inside the house, the back door opened and Rose Wilson appeared. She was a small woman in her 70s with silver hair and the same determined eyes as her son. She took in the scene before her son with his hands up, the officer with his gun drawn, the neighbors watching, and her face hardened with the familiar pain and anger. Officer Mercer, what are you doing to my son? Her voice was thin but unwavering as she carefully navigated the very steps Darnell had come to fix. Mrs. Wilson, please go back inside, Mercer called, his gun still trained on Darnell. I will not go back inside while you're pointing a gun at my boy, Rose replied, steadying herself on the railing. He told me he was coming by today to fix these steps. I've been waiting for him. More neighbors had gathered now. Someone down the street had called the fire station after hearing Darnell mention he worked there. Another had called the police chief directly. Chief Thompson was a regular at the community center bingo nights and had given out his card to several of the elderly residents. Officer, Darnell spoke again, his hand still raised. I understand you're doing your job, but I am Rose Wilson's son, and I am a firefighter with Station 8. My ID is in my wallet and my fire department badge is in my front left pocket. I'd like to show them to you, but I need to lower my hands to do that. Sweat beaded on Darnell's forehead, not from the spring heat, but from the strain of maintaining his composure with a gun pointed at his chest. He'd faced burning buildings and car wrecks without this level of fear. The wrong move, the wrong word could end everything in an instant. Mercer's radio crackled to life. Unit 17, this is dispatch. We've received multiple calls about your current location. Chief Thompson is requesting an update. Over. The radio seemed to break through something in Mercer's focus. He blinked, suddenly aware of the crowd that had gathered. Of Mrs. Wilson standing on her back steps. Of Beth Peterson's phone pointed directly at him. This is Unit 17, he responded, his gun still raised. Investigating a suspicious person at 1242 Maple Street. Situation under control. Over. Negative, Unit 17, came the reply. Lieutenant Rivera is en route to your location. Hold position and de-escalate. Repeat, de-escalate, over. A muscle twitched in Mercer's jaw. His eyes locked with Darnell's, who hadn't moved an inch, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't done anything but try to explain who he was and why he was there. Lower your left hand slowly and take out your fire department ID, Mercer finally ordered, his gun still aimed at Darnell's chest. With deliberate slowness, Darnell lowered his left hand to his front pocket and carefully extracted a leather wallet with a badge emblem embossed on the front. He held it up so Mercer could see it clearly in the afternoon sun. Now open it, Mercer instructed. Darnell flipped open the wallet to reveal his firefighter ID and badge. The afternoon light glinted off the metal, highlighting his name, rank, and the emblem of Station 8. For the first time, something like doubt crossed Mercer's face. In the distance, the sound of another police siren approached. Lieutenant Sandra Rivera's patrol car turned onto Maple Street, lights flashing but no siren. The weight of the moment hung in the air, Darnell with his badge held high, Mercer with his gun still drawn, and the neighbors of Oakwood Heights bearing silent witness to a scene that felt both shocking and all too familiar. In the growing crowd, someone murmured, "That could have been my son." Someone else was weeping quietly, and still, Darnell stood with one hand raised and one holding his badge, waiting for whatever would come next, hoping that the worst was behind them. But in neighborhoods like Oakwood Heights, history had taught hard lessons about hope and its limitations. As Lieutenant Rivera's car door opened, Darnell took another slow, careful breath and prepared for whatever the next moments might bring. Lieutenant Sandra Rivera stepped out of her patrol car, taking in the scene with practiced eyes. She saw Officer Mercer with his weapon drawn, a tall man in a gray t-shirt holding what looked like a badge, and at least a dozen neighbors watching from yards and porches. The tension in the air was thick enough to touch. "Officer Mercer," she called out as she approached, her voice calm but carrying authority. What's the situation here? Mercer didn't lower his weapon immediately. Suspicious person at this address. Claims to be a firefighter and the homeowner's son. Beth Peterson stepped forward, her phone still recording. He is Rose Wilson's son. We've all been trying to tell you that. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady with indignation. I've known Darnell since he was in high school. He visits his mother every week. Rivera looked at the man with his hand still raised. Something about him seemed familiar. Sir, could you tell me your name again, please? Lieutenant Darnell Wilson, Oakwood Heights Fire Department, Station 8, he replied, his badge still visible in his outstretched hand. Recognition flickered across Rivera's face. Wilson? From the joint training exercise last month? Hazmat response at the old factory? Darnell nodded slowly, relief washing over his features. Yes, ma'am. We worked the north entrance together. Rivera turned to Mercer, her expression hardening. Lower your weapon, officer. Now. For a moment, Mercer hesitated as if lowering his gun would mean admitting a mistake he wasn't ready to acknowledge. But Rivera's rank in the growing crowd left him little choice. Slowly, he holstered his weapon. The collective exhale from the neighbors was audible. Rose Wilson gripped the railing of her steps tighter, her knuckles white with the effort of staying upright through the ordeal. Mom, are you okay? Darnell called, finally able to shift his attention to his mother. I'm fine, baby, she answered, though the slight tremor in her voice suggested otherwise. Just these old legs getting tired of standing. Tom Garcia moved to help Rose back into her house. Come on, Rose, let me help you to your chair. Darnell will be right in. As they disappeared inside, Rivera motioned for Darnell to approach. Lieutenant Wilson, I apologize for this misunderstanding. Could I see your identification, please? Darnell reached carefully for his wallet and handed over both his driver's license and fire department ID. Rivera examined them briefly, then handed them back with a nod. Thank you. Again, I apologize for this situation. She turned to Mercer. Officer, a word, please. The two police officers stepped aside, their conversation hushed but intense. The neighbors remained, unwilling to leave until they were sure the situation was fully resolved. Beth Peterson continued recording, her phone capturing everything. You people can go home now, Mercer called to the onlookers, irritation clear in his voice. Show's over. Not until we know Darnell is safe, replied a woman from across the street. She was Pamela Lee, who had taught high school chemistry to both Darnell and her own children. We're staying right here. The solidarity was unmistakable. These weren't just nosy neighbors. They were a community forming a protective circle around one of their own. Darnell felt a complex mixture of emotions. Gratitude for their support, anger at being profiled, and a deep, weary sadness that none of this was new. Rivera finished her conversation with Mercer and approached Darnell again. Lieutenant Wilson, Officer Mercer was responding to reports of break-ins in the area. He didn't recognize you and was concerned about the side entrance approach. The explanation hung in the air, flimsy and transparent. Everyone present knew what had really happened, what always happened. Darnell had been seen as suspicious for one reason only, and it had nothing to do with which door he used to enter his mother's house. I understand, Darnell replied, the words practiced and hollow. He'd learned long ago that arguing rarely helped in these situations. If there's nothing else, I'd like to check on my mom and get started on those steps. They're not going to fix themselves, Rivera nodded. Of course. Again, I apologize for the inconvenience. As Darnell turned to go inside, a car pulled up at the curb. A tall man in a fire department polo shirt stepped out. Chief Gregory Howard from Station 8. His presence added another layer to the already complex scene. Lieutenant Wilson, Howard called out, approaching with quick strides. Got a call from dispatch saying there might be some trouble. His eyes took in the police cars, the lingering neighbors, and Darnell's expression. Understanding dawned immediately. Ah, I see. Chief, Darnell acknowledged with a nod. Just a misunderstanding. I was visiting my mom, and Officer Mercer here thought I might be breaking in. Howard's gaze shifted to Mercer, who had the decency to look uncomfortable under the fire chief's scrutiny. Is that right? A misunderstanding? Before Mercer could respond, Rivera stepped forward. Chief Howard, I'm Lieutenant Rivera. We're sorting things out here. There's been some confusion, but everything is under control now. Howard replied, unconvinced. Wilson is one of my best. Decorated twice for bravery. Saved 3 kids from an apartment fire last year. You might remember it, made all the papers. His words were casual, but the message was clear. Darnell Wilson was not just any firefighter, and this misunderstanding would not be swept under the rug. The neighbors had begun to disperse, but Beth Peterson approached Darnell, her phone now lowered. I got it all, Darnell. Every second. Just say the word and it goes straight to the news. Darnell looked at her, then at the officers, then at his chief. The weight of decision pressed on him. He could push this further, demand accountability, turn a personal injustice into a public stand. Or he could do what he'd always done, absorb the blow and move on, focusing on the work that mattered to him. Thank you, Beth, he said finally. I appreciate that. But right now I just want to fix my mom's steps and make sure she's okay. Beth nodded, understanding but clearly disappointed. You're a better person than most, Darnell Wilson. But I'm keeping this recording just in case you change your mind. Inside the house, Rose Wilson sat in her favorite armchair, a glass of water in her shaking hands. Tom Garcia sat beside her, his presence quietly supportive. When Darnell entered, Rose set down her glass and opened her arms. Come here, baby, she said, and Darnell knelt beside her chair, letting his mother's hands cup his face the way she had done since he was small. Are you all right? I'm fine, Mom, he assured her, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. No one was fine after staring down the barrel of a gun, after being made to feel like a criminal on their own family property. This shouldn't still be happening, Rose said quietly, anger and sorrow mingling in her voice. Not to my boy. Not after all these years. Outside, the conversation between the officers and Chief Howard continued. Their voices occasionally rose enough to be heard through the open windows. Words like protocol and appropriate response, and community relations. Tom Garcia patted Darnell's shoulder. Those steps still need fixing, son. And I wouldn't mind lending a hand if you'd have me. Sometimes the best thing to do after something like this is to just do something. Build something. Fix something. Darnell nodded, grateful for the older man's wisdom. You're right. Let me get my tools. As they headed back outside, Chief Howard was just leaving. He stopped when he saw Darnell. Wilson, take tomorrow off. That's an order. Chief, I'm on shift. Engine 4 needs Lopez can cover for you. Take the day. Spend it with your mother. Howard's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. And Wilson? This isn't over. The department stands behind its own. With that, Howard returned to his car, leaving Darnell to wonder exactly what he meant. The police officers were preparing to leave as well, Mercer avoiding eye contact as he got back into his patrol car. Lieutenant Rivera approached one last time. Lieutenant Wilson, I want you to have my card, she said, holding out a business card. My direct line is on the back. If anything like this happens again, or if you want to discuss today further, please call me. Darnell took the card, noting the handwritten number on the back. Thank you, Lieutenant. As the police cars pulled away, the street began to return to its normal, quiet state. Neighbors reluctantly went back to their routines, though many glanced back frequently, as if to reassure themselves that Darnell was still there, still safe. Tom and Darnell set up their work area by the back steps, laying out tools and measuring the rotted boards that needed replacing. The simple physical work was therapeutic, giving Darnell's hands something to do while his mind processed everything that had happened. You know, Tom said as they removed the first damaged step, my father used to say that a person's character is like these steps. It gets tested every day by the weight of the world, and sometimes parts of it get worn down or broken. But with the right support and some careful work, it can be rebuilt stronger than before. Darnell looked at the older man, appreciating both the metaphor and the attempt to find meaning in the day's events. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, Tom agreed. He also would have given that officer an earful that would have curled his hair. He chuckled, and after a moment, Darnell joined him. Inside, Rose Wilson watched her son through the window, her heart both heavy with the familiar pain of witnessing her child face injustice and swelling with pride at the man he had become despite it all. She picked up her phone and began dialing her sister in Atlanta. This was a story that needed telling, a burden that needed sharing. As the afternoon sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the yard, Darnell measured and cut a new board for the steps. Each precise movement was an affirmation. He belonged here, had always belonged here, would continue to belong here despite anyone who questioned it. And as he worked, somewhere across town, Beth Peterson uploaded her video, Chief Howard made some phone calls, and the wheels of consequence began to turn. The last police car hadn't even turned the corner before Beth Peterson's video began spreading through the neighborhood's group chat. Phones buzzed in kitchens and living rooms throughout Oakwood Heights as residents watched the footage of Officer Mercer pointing his gun at Darnell Wilson. Lieutenant Rivera sat in her patrol car half a block away, fingers drumming against the steering wheel as she made a decision. She picked up her radio. "Dispatch, this is Lieutenant Rivera. I need to speak with Chief Thompson immediately. It's regarding the incident on Maple Street." "Copy that, Lieutenant. Stand by." While waiting for the chief to respond, Rivera watched Officer Mercer's patrol car disappear down the street. In the 15 years she'd been on the force, she'd seen too many incidents like this. Moments where fear and bias led to dangerous escalation. As one of the few female officers on the force and the only Latina lieutenant, she understood all too well how quickly assumptions could be made based on appearance alone. The radio crackled back to life. "Lieutenant Rivera, Chief Thompson. What's the situation?" "Sir, we have a potential PR situation developing at 1242 Maple Street. Officer Mercer conducted a stop on Lieutenant Darnell Wilson of Station 8 Fire Department at his mother's residence. The officer drew his weapon during the encounter. Multiple witnesses were present, and at least one recorded the entire incident." There was a pause before Thompson responded, his voice tight. "Was anyone injured?" "No, sir. I arrived and de-escalated." Fire Chief Howard also responded to the scene. "Howard was there?" Thompson's tone shifted slightly. "I'll contact him directly. In the meantime, I want Officer Mercer back at the station immediately for debrief. And Rivera, I want your full report on my desk within the hour." "Yes, sir." Rivera started her car and headed toward the station. She'd known James Mercer for almost a decade. They'd worked patrol together when she first joined the force. He wasn't a bad cop, at least she hadn't thought so. But something had changed in him over the years. A hardening, a growing suspicion, particularly toward certain residents in certain neighborhoods. Back at Rose Wilson's house, Darnell and Tom had made good progress on the steps. The old rotted boards had been removed, and new pressure-treated lumber was being measured and cut. The physical labor helped Darnell process the adrenaline still coursing through his system. "Hand me that level, would you?" Darnell asked, extending his hand without looking up from the step he was securing. Tom passed him the tool. "You know, I've been thinking. Maybe we should add a handrail here for your mom. Something sturdy she can grip when the steps get slippery in winter." Darnell nodded, appreciating the older man's practical suggestion and the normalcy of the conversation. "That's a good idea. I've got some leftover balusters in my truck from a deck project last summer." The sound of the back door opening interrupted them. Rose Wilson stepped carefully onto the porch, holding a tray with 3 glasses of lemonade. "You boys look like you could use something cold," she said, her voice steadier now than it had been earlier. Darnell quickly moved to take the tray from her. "Thanks, Mom, you didn't have to do that." "Nonsense. Can't have you working in this heat without something to drink." She settled into the porch chair, watching them work. After a moment of silence, she added, "Beth called. Her video's already got over 1,000 views. The neighborhood association president wants to call an emergency meeting." Darnell sighed, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm. "I just wanted to fix your steps today, Mom, not become the center of another controversy." "I know, baby." Rose's eyes were sad but determined. "But sometimes these things choose us, not the other way around." Tom took a long sip of his lemonade. "Rose is right. This isn't just about what happened to you today, Darnell. It's about making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else tomorrow." Before Darnell could respond, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, frowning at the screen. "It's the station," he answered. "Wilson here." The voice of the dispatch operator came through clearly. "Lieutenant Wilson, we've got a structure fire reported at 578 Westfield Drive. That's in your area, but we know you're off duty. Chief Howard said to notify you anyway, given the circumstances." Something in the dispatcher's tone made Darnell straighten. "What circumstances, Carla?" "What's at that address?" There was a pause on the line. "It's Officer Mercer's residence, Lieutenant. His teenage son called it in. Reported heavy smoke coming from the kitchen area." Darnell's eyes met his mother's, who had heard enough of the conversation to understand. She nodded once, already knowing what her son would do. "Tell the chief I'm responding," Darnell said. I'm 10 minutes out. He ended the call and turned to Tom. I've got to go. There's a house fire. Whose house? Tom asked, though something in his expression suggested he already knew. Officer Mercer's. Darnell was already packing up his tools, moving with the efficiency of someone used to dropping everything for emergency calls. Rose stood up. Darnell, after what that man just did. He's got a teenage son, Mom, Darnell interrupted gently. And a house on fire. What happened earlier doesn't change that. Rose looked at her son for a long moment, then nodded, pride evident in her eyes despite her concern. You be careful, and you come back here when it's done, you hear me? These steps still need finishing. Yes, ma'am. Darnell kissed her cheek quickly, then hurried to his truck, still parked on the street where he'd left it before Mercer had interrupted his afternoon. As he drove away, Tom put an arm around Rose's shoulders. You raised a good one there, Rose. I know, she replied softly. I just wish the world was good enough to deserve him. Officer James Mercer had barely made it back to the station when the call came in. He was sitting in Chief Thompson's office, defensive and agitated as he tried to explain his actions on Maple Street. All due respect, Chief, but when an unknown subject approaches a residence from the side and looks around suspiciously, the chief cut him off. Unknown subject? James, half the neighborhood knew exactly who he was, including the homeowner who happens to be his mother. I couldn't have known that at the time, Mercer insisted, and when he reached for his pocket, after you asked for his ID, Thompson interjected, his patience visibly wearing thin. The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. The station secretary poked her head in. Chief, sorry to interrupt, but there's an emergency call for Officer Mercer. Mercer took the call on the chief's phone, his expression shifting from annoyance to shock to fear in the span of seconds. What when? Is he? Yes, I'm leaving now. He hung up and turned to Thompson. My house is on fire. My son called 911. Without waiting for a response, Mercer bolted from the office. Thompson followed close behind, calling out to Lieutenant Rivera as they passed her desk. Rivera, with me. We've got a situation. Darnell arrived at Westfield Drive just as the first fire engine was pulling up. He could see the smoke from 2 blocks away, thick dark clouds billowing from the back of a 2-story colonial. A teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17, was standing in the front yard, coughing and frantically waving down the firefighters. Darnell parked and jogged over to his crew, already grabbing his turnout gear from the truck. Wilson, thought you were off today, said Quan Lee, the engine driver, as he connected the hose to the nearest hydrant. I was in the neighborhood, Darnell replied, pulling on his gear with practiced speed. What's the situation? Kitchen fire spread to the dining room. 1 occupant accounted for. Teenage male, the homeowner's son. Captain Patel briefed him quickly as they approached the house. Says he was cooking and the oil caught fire. Tried to put it out with water. Darnell winced. Throwing water on a grease fire was a common and dangerous mistake. Anyone else inside? Kid says no, but we'll do a search to confirm. By now, Darnell was fully geared up. He joined the team entering the house, the familiar weight of his equipment and the disciplined rhythm of their protocol, temporarily pushing all other thoughts from his mind. This was what he was trained for. This was what mattered now. The kitchen was fully engulfed, flames licking up the walls and across the ceiling. The heat was intense even through their protective gear. Darnell and his partner moved methodically through the first floor, making sure no one was trapped, while another team tackled the blaze directly. They had just cleared the second floor when Darnell's radio crackled. Be advised, homeowner has arrived on scene and is attempting to enter the structure. Officers restraining him now. Through the upstairs window, Darnell could see Officer Mercer struggling against Chief Thompson and Lieutenant Rivera, who were physically preventing him from running into the burning house. My son, Mercer was shouting, his voice carrying even over the noise of the fire and equipment. Let me go. I need to find my son. He's safe, Officer Mercer, Rivera was saying, her grip firm on his arm. He's over there with the paramedics. You can't go in there. Darnell turned back to the task at hand. The fire was being contained, but there was still work to do. He pushed thoughts of irony and coincidence from his mind, focusing instead on saving as much of the house as possible. By the time they emerged from the house, sweaty and smoke-stained but successful in their efforts, the scene outside had calmed somewhat. Mercer was sitting on the curb beside his son, an arm wrapped tightly around the boy's shoulders. The teenager was wrapped in a shock blanket, oxygen mask covering his face. Darnell removed his helmet, wiping soot from his forehead as he approached Captain Patel for debrief. As he turned, he found himself face to face with Officer Mercer. For a moment, neither man spoke. The chaos of emergency vehicles, personnel, and neighbors gathered around created a strange bubble of silence around them. Mercer looked at Darnell, then at the fire department insignia on his turnout coat, then back at his face. Recognition, confusion, and something like shame crossed his features. "You," Mercer began, then stopped, seeming unable to find words. "Kitchen fire's under control," Darnell said professionally. "Structure's still sound, though there's significant damage to the back of the house. Smoke and water damage throughout the first floor." Mercer swallowed hard, looking back at his house, then at his son, then again at Darnell. "My boy said he was heating oil for fries. Went to answer a text and it happens fast," Darnell acknowledged. "Main thing is he got out and called 911 right away. Smart kid." Another beat of awkward silence passed between them. In the background, Lieutenant Rivera watched the interaction carefully, while Chief Thompson spoke with Fire Chief Howard, who had just arrived on scene. Finally, Mercer spoke again, his voice rough. "You didn't have to come here. After what happened earlier, you could have let someone else handle this call." Darnell looked at him steadily. "That's not how this works. Not for me, anyway." Before Mercer could respond, Darnell's captain called him back to help with equipment breakdown. With a brief nod to the officer, Darnell returned to his crew, leaving Mercer standing there, watching as the man he had held at gunpoint just hours earlier helped salvage what remained of his home. The smell of smoke clung to Darnell's skin, even after he'd removed his turnout gear. It was a familiar scent, one that followed him home after every fire. Usually he didn't mind it, a reminder of work well done, lives possibly saved. Today it carried a different weight. "Wilson, you good?" Captain Patel asked, pausing beside the engine where Darnell was stowing equipment. "Yeah." "Cap, just thinking." Patel followed Darnell's gaze to where Officer Mercer stood with his son, speaking with an insurance agent who had arrived remarkably quickly. The boy, Tyler, they'd learned, was still wrapped in the shock blanket, though he'd removed the oxygen mask. "Quite a coincidence, huh?" Patel said quietly. Darnell shook his head. "Don't believe in coincidences, Cap. Just life being life." "Well, however you look at it, you did good work today." "The whole crew did." Patel clapped him on the shoulder. "Finish up here and go home. That's an order. Your mom's probably worried sick." As Patel walked away to coordinate with the other first responders, Darnell continued his shutdown procedures, methodically checking and stowing equipment. The work was automatic, leaving his mind free to process the events of the day. Across the lawn, Lieutenant Rivera approached Mercer and his son. She'd been keeping a professional distance since the officer's arrival, but now seemed to have something important to discuss. Darnell couldn't hear their conversation, but he could read the body language, Rivera's straight posture and direct gaze, Mercer's defensive stance gradually softening as she spoke. After a few minutes, Rivera nodded to Mercer and walked toward the fire engine. She stopped when she reached Darnell. "Lieutenant Wilson," she greeted him. "How's the house looking?" "Kitchen's a total loss," Darnell replied honestly. "Dining room has significant damage. The rest is mostly smoke and water damage, but the structure is sound. They won't be staying here tonight, though." Rivera nodded, glancing back at Mercer and his son. "I've arranged for them to stay at the Holiday Inn on 3rd Street. Department will cover it temporarily." She paused, then added, "Officer Mercer wanted me to tell you that he'll come by the station tomorrow to talk." Darnell raised an eyebrow. "About?" "I think you know," Rivera said simply. "For what it's worth, Chief Thompson has already opened an internal review of the incident at your mother's house. Beth Peterson's video made it impossible to ignore." "I wasn't planning to file a complaint," Darnell said. "Sometimes the complaint files itself," Rivera replied with a slight shrug, "especially when half the neighborhood witnesses it." Chief Howard's SUV pulled up to the curb and he got out, already scanning the scene for his firefighter. Darnell nodded a goodbye to Rivera and went to meet his chief. "Wilson," Howard greeted him. "Just got the rundown from Patel. Good work containing the fire." "Just doing my job, Chief." Howard's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yeah, that's what I thought you'd say." He looked past Darnell to where Mercer was helping his son into a police cruiser, presumably for the ride to the hotel. Life has a funny way of evening scores sometimes. This wasn't about evening scores, Darnell objected, a rare edge in his voice. Howard held up his hands in a placating gesture. I know that. I know you, he sighed. Look, I've got to coordinate with Thompson on next steps. The mayor's office is already calling about the video from your mother's place. I need you to go home, get some rest, and be ready for whatever happens next. Darnell nodded, though the thought of whatever happens next sat uneasily with him. He'd spent most of his life trying to avoid becoming the center of attention, particularly this kind of attention. As the fire scene wound down, Darnell climbed into his pickup truck and sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. He should head back to his mother's house, finish those steps like he'd promised. But the emotional and physical toll of the day weighed on him. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Mom, yeah, the fire's under control. No, everyone's okay. Listen, I'm going to head home to shower and change first, then I'll come back to finish the steps. I know, but I smell like smoke and I've got soot all over me. Yes, ma'am. Love you too. As he started the truck, he glanced once more at the Mercer house. The front looked deceptively normal, with only a few broken windows hinting at the damage inside. But he knew the back of the house told a different story. Charred walls, melted appliances, water-soaked floors. It would take months to repair, and some things would never be the same. Tyler Mercer sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the carpet between his feet. His father moved around the room, unpacking the few items they'd been able to grab from the undamaged parts of the house. Some clothes, toiletries, Tyler's school laptop. You should eat something, Officer Mercer said, gesturing to the pizza box on the desk. You've had a rough day. Tyler didn't look up. It's my fault. The house. Mercer stopped what he was doing and sat beside his son. It was an accident, Ty. Accidents happen. I shouldn't have left the stove. I knew better. Yes, you should have been more careful, Mercer agreed, his tone gentle but honest. But beating yourself up won't fix the house. You made a mistake. You'll learn from it. Tyler finally looked at his father.
That firefighter who came out of our house, that was the guy from earlier, wasn't it?
The one you... Mercer's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Yes. Why would he help us after what happened? The question hung in the air, simple but profound. Mercer had been asking himself the same thing since the moment he recognized Darnell Wilson at his burning home. Because it's his job, Mercer said finally. And because he's a better man than I was today. Tyler absorbed this, then asked, Are you in trouble? I heard the other officers talking. I might be, Mercer admitted. But that's for me to deal with, not you. Your job is to finish the school year strong and not burn down any more kitchens. He attempted a smile, which Tyler returned weakly. Mercer's phone buzzed with a text from Chief Thompson. Meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp. Bring your union rep. He set the phone aside without replying. That was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, he needed to be here for his son and figure out how to rebuild more than just their house. Darnell's shower lasted nearly 30 minutes. Hot water washing away soot and smoke and the lingering tension of the day. He changed into fresh clothes, threw his smoky ones into the washing machine, and headed back to his mother's house as promised. When he arrived, he found not just Tom waiting to help finish the steps, but 3 other neighbors as well. They had materials laid out and tools ready. What's all this? Darnell asked as he got out of his truck. Thought you could use some help, said Paul Washington, who lived 2 doors down. After the day you've had. Word travels fast, Darnell observed. Small neighborhood, Tom replied with a shrug. And Beth's video hit 50,000 views about an hour ago. Darnell winced. Great. Don't worry, said Elaine Cooper, who taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. We're not here to talk about that unless you want to. We're here to fix these steps and maybe add that handrail you and Tom were discussing. The simple kindness of the gesture hit Darnell harder than he expected. These were people who had known him since he was a kid riding his bike up and down Maple Street. People who had watched him grow up, graduate, join the fire department. People who had seen him held at gunpoint that very morning and now were here, ready to help with a simple home repair project as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I appreciate that, he said finally, picking up a measuring tape. Let's get to work then. As they worked, the conversation flowed naturally around him. Talk of the upcoming summer block party, complaints about the potholes on Pine Street, Debates about the best fertilizer for growing tomatoes. Ordinary, everyday topics that had nothing to do with racial profiling or house fires or viral videos. Inside, Rose Wilson watched through the window, a small smile on her face. The phone had been ringing all afternoon. Friends, family, church members all calling after seeing the video or hearing about what happened. She'd finally turned the ringer off, needing a break from the constant stream of outrage and concern, however well-meaning. Watching her son work alongside their neighbors, seeing the community literally rally around him to build something sturdy and lasting, eased some of the day's pain. This was what mattered, not the ugly moment captured on video but the response to it. The coming together. As dusk fell, they finished the new steps and handrail. Paul flipped a switch, and the solar-powered lights they'd installed along the edge of each step illuminated softly. "No more tripping in the dark," he announced proudly. Rose came out to inspect their work, testing the new handrail with a firm grip. "This is wonderful," she said, her voice warm with gratitude. "All of you, thank you." "Least we could do, Rose," Tom replied. "Neighbors look out for each other. That's how it's supposed to be." As they packed up tools and cleaned the work area, Darnell's phone rang. The screen showed Station 8. He stepped away to answer it. "Wilson, Lieutenant, it's Carla from Dispatch. Just wanted to let you know there's a bunch of reporters trying to get a statement from the department about today's incidents. Chief Howard told me to give you a heads up that they might try to contact you directly." Darnell sighed. "Thanks for the warning, Carla. There's something else," she added. "The mayor's office called. They want you at City Hall tomorrow at noon." "The mayor?" Darnell repeated, surprised. "Why? Didn't say. Just that it's important and related to both incidents today." After ending the call, Darnell rejoined the group, his expression thoughtful. "Everything okay?" his mother asked, noticing the change in his demeanor. "Not sure," he replied honestly. "Looks like tomorrow's going to be complicated." Tom patted him on the back. "Whatever happens, you've got people behind you. Remember that." As the neighbors said their goodbyes and headed home, Darnell and his mother sat on the newly built steps, testing their sturdiness. The evening air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of someone's backyard grill a few houses away. "What a day," Rose said softly, leaning against her son's solid shoulder. "Yeah," Darnell agreed, his arm around her. "What a day." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching fireflies begin to appear in the gathering darkness. Eventually Rose spoke again. "You know, your father would be so proud of who you've become, how you handled yourself today." Darnell nodded, throat tight with unexpected emotion. "I hope so. I know so," Rose insisted. "Not many men could face down a gun in the morning and then save the gunman's home in the afternoon. That takes a special kind of strength. I was just doing my job, Mom." "No," she said firmly. "Today was more than that, and we both know it. Today was about who you are, deep down. Don't diminish that." As darkness settled fully over Maple Street, lights came on in houses up and down the block. Through windows, they could see families gathering for dinner, watching TV, living their ordinary lives. Lives that would go on much as before, while Darnell knew his had shifted in ways he was only beginning to understand. Tomorrow would bring reporters and meetings and likely more viral videos. But tonight, sitting on these solid new steps with his mother beside him, Darnell allowed himself to simply breathe, to exist in this moment of quiet between the storms. The City Hall steps were crowded with reporters by 11:30 the next morning. Darnell parked his truck 2 blocks away and took a moment to gather himself before walking into what he knew would be a circus. He'd chosen to wear his dress uniform, not to make a statement, but because it felt like armor of sorts, a reminder of who he was and what he stood for. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Standing tall doesn't mean standing alone. "Love you." He smiled slightly, pocketed the phone, and began the walk to City Hall. He'd made it half a block when Chief Howard pulled up beside him in his department SUV. "Need a lift, Lieutenant?" Howard asked, rolling down the window. "Thanks, Chief, but I think I need the walk." Howard nodded, understanding. "I'll be right behind you then." He parked and fell into step beside Darnell. "You ready for this?" "Not really," Darnell admitted. "Never thought I'd be at the center of something like this." "None of us do," Howard replied. "Until we are." As they approached City Hall, the reporters noticed them and surged forward, cameras flashing, questions overlapping into an unintelligible wall of sound. Uniformed officers from the police department formed a pathway through the crowd, creating a channel for Darnell and Chief Howard to walk through. Inside the building, the mayor's chief of staff was waiting to escort them to a conference room. Darnell was surprised to find it already full of people. Mayor Reynolds at the head of the table, Police Chief Thompson beside her, Lieutenant Rivera against one wall, and several city council members he recognized from community events. What he didn't expect to see was Officer Mercer, sitting stiffly in a chair near the corner, eyes fixed on the table in front of him. "Lieutenant Wilson," Mayor Reynolds greeted him, standing to shake his hand. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Darnell sat, acutely aware of every eye in the room on him. Chief Howard took the chair beside him, his presence a silent show of support. "I won't waste time with pleasantries," the mayor continued once everyone was settled. "We're here because we have a situation that requires immediate attention." She nodded to an aide who pulled up Beth Peterson's video on a large screen at the end of the room. Watching the footage was surreal. Darnell saw himself from the outside, hands raised, face calm despite the gun pointed at his chest. He saw his mother emerge from the house, the neighbors gathering. The video had been viewed over 300,000 times overnight, picked up by national news outlets and social media accounts. When it ended, the room was silent for a long moment. "This video has created a crisis for our city," Mayor Reynolds said finally. "But more importantly, it has revealed a problem that needs addressing. Chief Thompson has opened an internal affairs investigation, and Officer Mercer has been placed on administrative leave pending the results." Mercer's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, still avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. "However," the mayor continued, "this goes beyond one incident or one officer. The issues it raises are systemic and require a systemic response." What followed was a detailed discussion of policy changes, community oversight, additional training, and departmental reforms. Darnell listened carefully, offering input when asked but mostly observing the political machinery at work. It was clear that city leadership was scrambling to get ahead of a PR disaster, but there also seemed to be genuine concern and commitment to meaningful change. After nearly an hour, the mayor turned to Darnell directly. "Lieutenant Wilson, you've been remarkably quiet. I'd like to hear your thoughts." All eyes turned to him again. Darnell took a moment to organize his response. "Policies and training are important," he began slowly, "but they only work if they're accompanied by a change in culture. What happened yesterday wasn't just about one officer making a bad call. It was about assumptions and fears that run deep." He looked around the room, meeting each person's gaze. "I've lived in this city my whole life. I've served this community as a firefighter for 12 years. And yet to some people I'll always be suspicious first and a neighbor second. That's what needs to change, and no policy manual can do that alone." The mayor nodded thoughtfully. "What would you suggest?" "Honest conversation," Darnell replied. "Real relationship building between police and the communities they serve, especially communities of color. Not just photo ops or occasional town halls, but consistent, meaningful engagement. Officers walking beats instead of just driving through. Getting to know people as people, not potential threats." Chief Thompson leaned forward. "We've tried community policing initiatives before." "With respect, Chief," Darnell interrupted, "trying something and committing to something are different things. This has to be a long-term commitment, not a temporary response to a crisis." The discussion continued, sometimes heated but mostly productive. Throughout it all, Officer Mercer remained silent, a study in controlled discomfort. As the meeting wound down, Mayor Reynolds made a surprising proposal. "Lieutenant Wilson, I'd like to appoint you to a new civilian oversight committee. Your perspective would be invaluable, and your actions yesterday, both in standing your ground during the confrontation and in responding to Officer Mercer's house fire, demonstrate exactly the kind of character we need." Darnell hesitated. "I appreciate the offer, Mayor, but I need some time to think about it. My job as a firefighter comes first, and I'm not looking to become the face of a movement." "Of course," she agreed. "Take whatever time you need. But please consider it seriously. Sometimes leadership finds us whether we're looking for it or not." As the meeting broke up, people filed out of the conference room in small groups, some still deep in conversation. Darnell remained seated, reviewing his notes and processing everything that had been discussed. He was so focused that he didn't immediately notice Officer Mercer approaching until the man was standing beside his chair. "Lieutenant Wilson," Mercer said stiffly. "Could I have a word?" Darnell looked up, surprised. Chief Howard, who had been about to leave, paused questioningly. Darnell nodded to him, indicating it was okay to go ahead. "Have a seat," Darnell offered, gesturing to the chair beside him. Mercer sat, his posture rigid with discomfort. For a long moment he seemed to struggle with what to say. Finally he spoke, his voice low and rough with emotion. "My son keeps asking me why you came to our house, why you helped us after what happened. I don't have a good answer for him." Darnell considered this. "What did you tell him?" "That it was your job," Mercer replied. "But we both know it was more than that. You could have let someone else respond. No one would have blamed you." "I would have blamed me," Darnell said simply. Mercer nodded slowly, understanding. Another silence stretched between them, laden with all the things that couldn't be easily said, about history and assumptions, about power and fear, about the weight of uniforms, both blue and turnout yellow. "I owe you an apology," Mercer finally said. "Not just the standard sorry for the misunderstanding kind, a real one." He met Darnell's eyes directly for the first time. "I was wrong, not just in my actions but in my thinking, and I'm sorry." The words hung in the air, imperfect but genuine. Darnell knew better than to think one apology could erase decades of systemic issues, or even the specific trauma of yesterday's confrontation, but it was a start, a small opening in a wall that had seemed impenetrable. "Thank you," Darnell said, accepting the apology without minimizing what had happened. "What happens now?" Mercer sighed heavily. "Internal affairs, probably a suspension. Retraining at minimum. Might lose my job depending on how the investigation goes and how much pressure the department faces." "That's not what I meant," Darnell clarified. "I meant with you. Not your job, you." Understanding dawned in Mercer's eyes. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've got a lot to think about. A lot to reconsider." He paused. "Tyler wants to thank you himself for saving our house. He's pretty torn up about the whole thing." "He seems like a good kid," Darnell offered. "Tell him accidents happen. What matters is how we respond to them." The irony of his words wasn't lost on either of them. As they left City Hall together, the reporters surged forward again, cameras flashing. The sight of Darnell and Officer Mercer walking side by side created an immediate frenzy of questions and speculation. "No comment," Darnell said firmly, moving through the crowd with Mercer beside him. They parted at the bottom of the steps with a simple nod of acknowledgement, each heading in different directions but changed by their brief intersection. 2 weeks later, Darnell pulled up to his mother's house for their regular Sunday dinner. The new backsteps and handrail had weathered nicely, and Rose had planted flowers along the path, adding splashes of color to the approach. As he got out of his truck, he noticed a moving van in front of the Mercer house several blocks away. Tyler was helping carry boxes while his father directed the movers. Their house was still under repair, the back half covered in construction tarps. Darnell gave a small wave when Tyler looked up and noticed him. The boy waved back, then nudged his father, who turned and offered a solemn nod of recognition. "They're moving to a rental while the repairs are finished," Rose explained, appearing beside Darnell. "That insurance money finally came through." "Good," Darnell said. "They need a fresh start, don't we all?" "Sometimes," his mother replied thoughtfully. Inside, the house was filled with familiar Sunday smells: pot roast, fresh bread, apple pie cooling on the counter. But there was something new, too, a framed newspaper article on the wall. It showed Darnell at City Hall, in his dress uniform, speaking at the first meeting of the new Civilian Oversight Committee. The headline read, "Local hero leads change after confrontation goes viral." "Mom, I told you not to frame that," Darnell protested, though without much heat. "My house, my walls," Rose replied with a smile. "Besides, people need to see that good can come from hard things." Darnell shook his head but didn't argue further. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind of meetings, interviews, and difficult conversations. The committee was making real progress, though there was still resistance from some quarters. Officer Mercer had received a 60-day suspension and mandatory retraining, a punishment some thought too lenient and others too harsh. The viral video had faded from the headlines, replaced by newer crises and controversies. But in Oakwood Heights, something had shifted. Neighbors spoke to each other more, looked out for each other more intentionally. The police department had started a walking patrol program, with officers assigned to get to know residents by name rather than just driving through. Small steps, Darnell thought, like the ones he'd built for his mother, one board at a time, measured carefully, secured firmly. Not perfect, but solid enough to bear weight and last through seasons of rain and sun and snow. His phone buzzed with a text from Chief Howard. "Committee meeting tomorrow, 6 p.m., bringing that proposal we discussed." Darnell texted back a quick acknowledgement, then put his phone away. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Today was for family, for good food, for the simple pleasure of sitting on sturdy steps in the evening air with his mother beside him, watching fireflies rise from the grass like hope made visible.